Morning, Orod.
Hey Sama, good morning. How are you?
Good. It's sunny in Sydney today. What about
Oh,
you?
it's gonna be a really hot day today. Apparently, it will be around 30 degree.
Wow, finally, Sydney,
Yes.
Melbourne is on the same page. It calls for a celebration.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right. So I have a good topic for
Hmm.
today.
Yep.
Um, a few days ago, someone told me that Kanban doesn't have any planning and has no way to help to, build a long-term vision. So what do you think about that?
Wow, okay. That is, this has to be one of the myths, right? Uh, let's take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
When it means planning, what does it mean for people? Because when we go through the Kanban cadences, Kanban does have replenishment.
Mm-hmm.
So at different level of maturity,
Mm-hmm.
Kanban do have that, and replenishment is very similar to what Scrum has as sprint planning.
Yeah.
Now, the cadence is when it go to that, like this is one of the Kanban meetings, the replenishment,
Mm-hmm.
and you can have the frequency based on the context of the team. So, for example, in the Kanban replenishment meeting, you do need your stakeholder because, to understand the context that why this is important,
Mm-hmm.
why should we do this? And that is the first question I believe anyone should be asking.
Mm-hmm.
So the moment you go to a replenishment meeting and you have your stakeholders or your customer who is providing you with the context and the reasoning, you can always have the discussion and sometimes negotiation with them that, okay, this is the capacity we have. Tell us which is the most important thing for us to do. So when I see all this happening at the same place, this is very much aligned to any business strategy or organizational strategy because our capacity, like the teams, the delivery team's capacity, is being utilized to do the right thing at the right time. So
Yes.
that is something for me is definitely planning because it is also incorporating a lot of things when it comes to that. Replenishment is not like as simple as, like you have a backlog, you just pick things from there based on your capacity. It is more around aligning with the
Mm.
business strategy and with your customers who are your stakeholder and finding out what is the most important thing to do at the time. And when you have those kind of alignment and then you accept the work, for me, that is the best form of planning because, there couldn't be any confusion in
Mm.
that place. But what's your thought in that?
Excuse me. Well, yeah, you mentioned the right, I think, cadence of meeting in, what we have in Kanban method, replenishment, and you compare it with Scrum sprint planning, which is true. But the thing is, and this is how I actually think about it, right? So Kanban doesn't prescribe how you work, right? But it helps you to manage your work better, however you do it, right? So planning, as you mentioned, has different definition, right? Normally, planning means that we understand the requirement, estimate the size, how long it gonna take. Do we want to, invest? People talk about the return of investment or the business value that this piece of work, which can be project or user story or whatever, can return, stuff like that. So, but what normally happens based on my experience is because Kanban doesn't prescribe you and doesn't call it planning and doesn't tell you that you need to estimate, you need to do this, you need to do that, then what happens is people just start making a chaos out of it, right? And this is, I think, it doesn't do anything necessarily directly with Kanban. It's the lack of understanding about Kanban and in general, lack of understanding about how we want to manage our work. And because Kanban, and because most of us, we want someone else come and tell us what to do. And because Kanban doesn't directly do it, then people just pulling work or pushing it to the other person, and they call it Kanban. Okay. So it's definitely a myth, but it's to me, it's basically up to people how to use it. You know, you can use the knife to, I don't know, for cooking, or you can, or surgery, or you can use the knife to kill someone, right? So it's not the knife, it's you how to use it. Okay. Um, that's how I actually seeing it. And what I think we need in organization when we want to introduce Kanban is either the people needs to start learning properly how to use Kanban, or ask someone with the experience come and initially help them,
Mm,
rather than they just watch a 5 minutes video on YouTube and start, put cards on the wall and say, okay, this is Kanban. And because Kanban never said planning, so we don't need to plan. So when I want to start, some work, I start doing it. Or when my manager said do it, then I'll do it. Right.
mm,
But because in some framework like Scrum or SAFe, or I don't know, the project management framework, they specifically call it planning, and it also more or less prescribe what you need to do. So
mm,
in those framework, people say, okay, we need to plan, we have to do this, we have to ask this question or stuff like that.
mm.
So I think that's how actually I see it.
No, you're actually right, Oro. It is, of course, depending on how people see it. But I also believe, like the words that is being used, like planning versus replenishment, this also have more psychological depth. For example, when we call anything as replenishment, it is more like, helping us to see that there is a capacity available. So you
Mhm,
are just filling that out. So it's like, like for example, if you have a glass of water, now, like the glass is empty, you want to fill more water in the glass. Or you can fill it with, I don't know, like Coke,
yeah.
or something else. When we call it planning, and this is something like planning also had the same intention, but how it is being used and misused would be the
Mhm,
right word, is that every sprint, or like, whenever there is a planning, you just plan without taking into consideration that how much of the work is overflowing.
mhm,
So sometimes that becomes more like a push kind of, like sentiment. It is
yeah.
not a pull one, but whenever you are replenishing, you always have to replenish only the capacity that is available.
And
So,
also, can I interrupt you here?
yeah.
Capacity available, all those kind of thing is definitely it's good,
Mm, mm,
but also the pull criteria is important. So yeah, you might have capacity, but if the work is not ready or hasn't met the
mm,
pulling criteria, which for
yeah,
example in this scenario can be,
yeah.
does it have the enough requirement?
Mm,
Have we done the design, or have we talked to the customer? You
yeah.
know what I'm saying? Those
Yes.
kind of things that we normally do before actually
Mm,
start doing the work or planning
yes.
do the work
Yes.
needs to be done. Then when you have capacity, then you can pull it. So I
Mm,
strongly suggest people, rather than just pull the work and start doing, jump on the work and start doing it,
yeah.
make sure to document, and this is one of the Kanban practices. Make policies explicit, and policy is how we want to work together, including pooling criteria, right?
Yes.
So, what do you need to start the work? Make it explicit, write it down, talk to your customer, talk to your stakeholder, make sure that you both
Mm,
clear about it. Then you can say, all right, now I have capacity, and I'm clear about this work, and I can pull it and
yeah.
basically plan
I
to pull and plan to do.
agree. And this is very similar to people who are using or practicing Scrum. Definition of ready should do the same thing as well. So anything, if like that is not ready, which is again depending on the team's context, that what they define as ready, they shouldn't be pulling that into that sprint. But again, this is where the difference, one difference that I can see in replenishment and any planning is that replenishment is always about, thinking from a point of view that, okay, if I don't do this work now, what would be the impact? It is not about the futuristic ROI. So it is more like having those conversation with the stakeholder to figure out that if we have only three capacity left and
Mm,
there are five things in here, which three should we be working on? Let's have that conversation and align on the goals here. And this is very much related to a long-term vision for the organization, not only for the team, because if everyone starts doing the right thing, which is aligned to the organizational vision and strategy, then definitely, like there's no issue because people wouldn't create waste in the system by doing meaningless work.
mm,
it, our capacity is very precious.
yes.
And at the same time, the expectation is that the upstream is well designed. It has all the required thing, as you mentioned, the pulling criteria, which is
Mm,
nothing but having a well-defined upstream when where things are properly, put in. Like for example, if there is a initiative coming in, the initiative is well, refined in a way, the feasibility checks are done, it has been vetted
mm,
that this, if we do this initiative, it will be beneficial for us and the customer at the same time, and the customer will accept it as
mhm,
soon as we are ready. So when all these things are already done, it also gives a lot of confidence to the delivery teams because all they have to do is that match it up with their capacity. If they have capacity, they can pull the work and start working on it because
yeah.
all the required information is there, and they are also very sure that if they
Mm,
do this work, it is not going to go to waste. It is not going to sit on the shelf. Some
yeah.
custom, like the customer or the stakeholder, will consume it as
Mm,
soon as this is done. So when you see about all these factors, this is what a good planning looks to me,
mhm,
where we are doing things, we are planning for future, but like having all the facts checked. So it is not done in isolation. It
mhm,
is always about that conversation. So
absolutely.
there's one more thing, Aura, that I would like to call out here.
Mhm,
When we talk about replenishment, this is actually taking few practices together. If you look at it, this is also, having an aspect of the sprint review where the stakeholder can provide feedback that what your backlog looks like in future, and sprint planning together because we are meeting with the stakeholder. So, in any ideal replenishment, you will have your key stakeholder present and you will have key representative from the team who can have those conversations. So, if you think about it, this is like combining few Scrum events to achieve the outcome. So, again, calling it out, it's a myth that Kanban doesn't support planning.
True. You talk a little bit about Scrum, which I prefer not to focus too much on Scrum because, you know, I don't know, some people might get a little bit defensive. Um, I actually wanted to talk about another thing. So far we talk about some of the Kanban practices that can help with the planning. But I
Mhm.
want to actually focus now on Kanban principle, one of the principle of the service delivery, which is one of my favorite to be honest, which says manage work, not the worker.
Mm.
So managing work implicitly means we need to plan to do the work as well before we do it. Okay.
Yes.
But what I think it's important is, and I've seen when people, in knowledge work, in software and stuff like that, especially, people who are very agile, enthusiastic kind of people, right? They say, okay, we don't need to plan that much. We need to start doing it because by doing the work, we learn more about the work.
Mm.
However, on the other hand, when I talk to my friends who work in, construction and not knowledge work, they spent a lot on planning.
Mm.
So one of my friends, he's a project management manager in construction. So in construction, which is more predictable, they spend maybe 80% of their project time to plan the project, 20% to do the work.
Yes.
In software, we sometimes we don't spend enough on planning. We just jump to do the work to learn it and stuff like that, which based on my experience as a technical and developer person, sometimes it helps,
Mm.
but I think we need to find a balance.
Yes,
How much we want to spend on the discovery and planning, and how much we want to spend on delivering actually the work.
that's true.
And finding this balance, I think it's a little bit difficult. And I think the person who asked me was basically thinking about, okay, we don't need to plan, or Kanban never said plan. Okay, let's do it and see
Mm.
how we go, right?
Mm.
If and we learn as we go. Okay, and which is true, but it has consequences, right? So if the work is too big and you want to spend, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months just to see how we go, then we
Mm.
waste a lot of time, right? And then we need to start breaking the work, start prioritization, a lot of other things that come with it. But just kind of maybe to wrap it up and summarize what we discussed. So today we talk about Kanban has no planning. So, and some of you mentioned that it's a myth. Maybe Kanban hasn't explicitly called replenishment as a planning session, but implicitly by saying managing the work, I think we talk about plan before start working, and also you talk about upstream, which helps with the planning. We talk about pull criteria, which again help with planning. Um, did I miss anything else? Do you want to add anything else?
Uh, and also aligning with your stakeholder about what's the highest priority is and why. That's an important aspect of planning anywhere. Doesn't matter where it is done. So yeah, we which Kanban covers, I believe, and that is it for today, isn't it?
I guess so.
Yeah,
But
cool.
so thanks everyone for listening and watching us. I think today we again clarify another Kanban myth. So find a balance, how much you want to spend on planning, not too much, not too less.
Yes, that's the golden nugget out of it. And thank you, everyone. And thanks, Arod.
Thanks.